when I did my NLP practitioner's training half a lifetime ago, the trainer, Cedric, started the first day with a little thought exercise, a thought experiment, and it goes something like this. There is a pond, and this pond has an organism growing in it, an algae, a pond scum, that kind of thing. And this organism doubles in size every day. The pond is fully covered by the end of day 30. So when is the pond half covered? So I was eager to please. I shot my hand up and I shouted out that it was day 15, obviously. And I was wrong, obviously, because it turns out that the pond is half covered on day 29, and then it doubles, and then by day 30 it's fully covered. Now, Cedric's NLP training was not merely just to teach us the shiny tools and tips and techniques of neuro-linguistic programming. His actual intention with his courses was always for it to be a transformational experience, a personal transformation journey. So in the spirit of sell them what they want so you can give them what they need, his intention was for us to realize that the time to change is now, and that we should understand the necessity of making empowering changes, even if we don't think it's necessary, or even if we think we can get to it later. Now, I've pondered this thought exercise many times over the years, but recently I started wondering, if the pond is completely covered on day 30, and it's half covered on the second last day, how much is it covered at the start of day 1? I was wondering, how would I know that there is a problem, that the problem is beginning, so I can do something about it from the outset? So I started calculating. And what I mean by calculating is I opened AI and asked it a bunch of questions because I failed maths 30 years ago in high school. But as it turns out, I never needed any of the things I failed in maths 30 years ago until now. And now we have AI. So I asked it the question, if day 30 ends with 100% coverage, what is the percentage of coverage at the beginning of day 1? And it told me that the answer is negligible but non-zero. So what does that mean? So negligible turns out to be 0.00007 zeros followed by a bunch of numbers that made my head hurt. So I asked AI to write it out in words so that I can understand this, and it turns out to be 9/100 millionths of a percentage. 9/100 millionths of a percentage of the pond is covered at the beginning of day 1, at inception. So that first speck of algae. So I guess we might as well go with negligible but non-zero. But I wanted to know, how much is that negligible but not zero? So I started playing around with sizes, and I made the pool the size of an Olympic swimming pool. And with the help of AI, I found out that we begin day 1 with a piece of algae the size of, well, I asked it to calculate it in a square because a circle would have made it too complicated. We begin with a piece of algae the size of 1 square millimeter, or 1.08 millimeters by 1.08 millimeters to be exact. But let's not split hairs. And for my American friends, that translates roughly to 1 ungodly fraction of an inch squared. And yes, I know that inches put a man on the moon, but we're going to stick with metric to keep things simple, or at least less complicated. So we have a swimming pool, an Olympic-sized swimming pool that is 50 meters by 25 meters, or for my American friends, we can just go with 50 yards by 25 yards to keep it understandable for you. And no matter where you stand in or around the swimming pool, I bet that you won't see a speck of 1 square millimeter floating on the surface. That would be like seeing one piece of glitter floating on the surface. So no matter where you stand, you won't see that, even if it's right in front of you. So we won't see problems at inception, when it begins. But at what point will it be possible to see the problem? How small a patch of algae or pond scum will we be able to see floating on the surface? And this, while I was thinking of this, I also understood why sea rescue is such a difficult task, because you're looking for something infinitesimal in a vast expanse. It's like looking for a speck the size of a grain of sugar floating on an Olympic swimming pool. Now, I know there are other factors like the color of the algae and the color of the water, but let's assume there's a high contrast and that we would be able to see the difference between the algae and the water. How big a patch or how small a patch would we notice? Would it be the size of a postage stamp or the size of a postcard? Would it be a tennis ball or a soccer ball? Maybe we should think about this a little bit differently. Instead of how big or how small it would be before we notice it, let's think about how long will it take until you see it. Let's begin this thought experiment at midnight on the 1st of January. So when the fireworks go off, when you're busy with your New Year's celebrations. And that would mean that it would be 100% covered on the 30th of January at 11:59 p.m. and 59 seconds. So we begin with a speck the size of 1 square millimeter at midnight on the 1st of January. And if you're lucky to spot it when it's the size of a postage stamp, which is kind of unlikely given the size of the Olympic swimming pool, that will be just before 10 p.m. on the 9th of January. Maybe you see it when it's the size of a postcard, and that will be a little before 7 p.m. on the 14th of January. What about a tennis ball? 1 p.m. on the 12th of January. What about a soccer ball? And this is where it got interesting. A patch the size of a soccer ball, the cross-section of a soccer ball, that would be the end of the day on the 15th of January, 11:59 and 34 seconds to be exact, according to AI. So literally halfway through the 30-day period, that patch of organism, algae, pond scum, whatever you want to call it, is the size of a soccer ball. Half the pool will be covered at midnight on the 30th of January, the beginning of the very last day of the 30-day period. But halfway through that period, it's only the size of a soccer ball. Coming back to thinking about sea rescue, I asked AI to tell me when will the patch be the size of the average Olympic swimmer? And it did a whole bunch of provisos, if this, then that, and it said that it would be the size of the the average size of the Olympic swimmer by 10 p.m. on the 19th of January. Now, this thought exercise makes it very clear, to me at least, how not addressing problems early on has the potential to lead to catastrophe, but also how easily we're mistaken about what early enough actually is. More so, it made me think about habits. This thought exercise is a useful way to make sense of how important it is to cultivate habits, to intentionally cultivate habits that serve me, because the habits that don't serve me are typically the ones that happen on their own without me being aware. That's like the pond scum that grows unnoticed until it's a problem, but by then it might be too late. Now, conventional wisdom says it takes 21 days for a habit to form. Turns out this is a myth. It comes from a guy called Maxwell Maltz. He was a plastic surgeon, and he noticed that it took roughly 21 days for his patients, to get used to the new face looking back at them in the mirror, the different nose, the different ears, or maybe the stump at the end of their arm. So he extrapolated this to behavior change in general, and he wrote a book about it in 1960. And since then, it's been one long game of they say. They say it takes 3 weeks, 21 days for a habit to form. Now, in 2009, somebody did some proper science and found that it takes an average of 66 days to reliably incorporate one of the three activities that they tested for in their study, which was eating a piece of fruit with lunch, drinking a bottle of water with lunch, or running 15 minutes before dinner. And 66 days is the average for simple habits, specifically those three simple habits. But they found that generally it took 18 to 254 days to instill a habit. So your New Year's resolution will only become a habit by the 18th of January, anywhere from the 18th of January to the 1st of September. Now, in 2015, researchers used machine learning to analyze huge amounts of data coming from their observations of people's behaviors in two settings: going to the gym or washing hands in the hospital. I assume they meant washing their own hands in the hospital. And they factored in all the variables that affect someone's decision to keep on doing the behavior. And what they found was there's no magic number. A simple habit like washing your hands takes a few weeks to instill, while there's something more complex like an exercise habit takes up to half a year to put in place. So the bottom line is, it takes longer to entrench a habit than you think it would. How long? Well, that depends. It depends on what type of behavior it is. Teaching yourself a new skill is much longer than remembering to drink a bottle of water. It depends on how complex the new behavior is. Washing your hands is less complex than going to the gym. It depends on how many opportunities you have to practice. Practice 5 times in one day versus 1 time in 5 days. And it depends on how much effort you put into practicing this behavior, or are you just going through the motions? And it depends on what cues and triggers remind you to do the thing that you want to make a habit. Are these prominent, or don't you even notice them? So back to the study of 2009, with the average range of 18 to 254 days to instill a habit. That has a midpoint of about 118 days. Now this is an interesting number because as I played around with AI to work with various scenarios with this pond scum thought exercise, I was quite surprised with what I found. Let me explain. In playing around with this idea, I experimented with different sizes to get to something I could make sense of. The Olympic swimming pool was useful to make the duration of 30 days illustrative, to make sense of a period of 30 days. But then I started going bigger and bigger and bigger, and I went with the biggest and the smallest things I could make sense of, hypothetically, which turned out to be planet Earth and a water molecule. Now, if you thought it's difficult to notice a grain of sugar floating on an Olympic swimming pool, imagine a speck of pond scum or algae the size of a water molecule on a pond the size of the surface area of the entire planet Earth. So we begin with this pathogen, this organism, that at inception is the size of a water molecule, the cross-section of a water molecule, and that doubles every day in size. How long will it take before the pond with a surface area the size of the entire planet Earth is completely covered in pond scum? Turns out that's 112 days. So starting at midnight on the 1st of January, it will be completely covered by the 22nd of April at 16 minutes past 4 in the afternoon, in case you had something planned. 112 days. It's only a few days shy of the midpoint in the 18 to 254 day range that the 2009 study spoke about, where the habits of washing hands or going to gym was at play. Now let's let that sink in for a moment. We begin with something the size of a water molecule And we begin with that on midnight on the 1st of January, right when the fireworks go off. And before dinner on the 22nd of April, a body of water the size of the entire planet, not just the oceans, not the mountains, the entire planet is completely covered in pond scum. Somewhere there's a vegan that's going to say, I wonder if I can put this in my smoothie. The rate of change of daily doubling is not the norm. I acknowledge that. It's not the norm for anything that we know of. But the whole thought exercise of daily doubling is to highlight a point. So what's my point? My point is that change happens. It's infinitesimally small at the beginning. It might not even exist at a level we can understand. When we begin to notice the change, we think that's the beginning, but it's not. We think we have plenty of time to do something about it, but we may have less time than we think. Early on in the process, it's too little to notice. In an Olympic swimming pool over a 30-day period, halfway through the 30 days, by the end of day 15, it's only the size of a soccer ball. Less than a third of the time, it's only the size of a postage stamp by day 9. And because it's too little to notice, the overall change is too gradual to catch it early. It's like that boiling frog thing. And then there's the problem with concentration and it being if it's concentrated or diffuse. If it's concentrated, then we have a patch the size of a soccer ball. That turns out to be about 32,000 pieces of the initial algae. Compare that to 32,000 1 millimeter pieces like confetti or glitter spread across the entire pool evenly. Chances are you won't notice it in that case. And then we are busy and distracted with work and family and life and petty dramas at work and in family and in life that we then post on social media and see other people's petty dramas in work and life and family on social media. So what I'm getting at is that big problems start small and then they sneak up on you. And you're vigilant against the big monsters, but they're not big monsters when they sneak up on you. They're big monsters when they pounce on you. However, while they creep up on you, at first they are invisible. And then they go unnoticed. And then they're merely insignificant. And at some point they become unusual. And maybe then they become concerning. And then they become disturbing. And then they become worrying. And before you know it, you're in the shadow of a monster looming over you. By the time you notice the problem, it's possible that things are much further along than you think. When is it a problem? Is it when the pond is half covered? Is it when it's a quarter covered? That's only days 29 and 28. Is it when it's a tenth covered? Can you even notice a potential problem if a pond is the size of the entire surface area of the planet? Maybe you think it's unrealistic to use the entire surface area of the planet for a comparison. But think about all the aspects of life that demand your attention or compete for your attention. You have family, work, budget, due dates, deadlines, doubts, daydreams, hopes, plans, reminders, meetings, gatherings, worries, frustrations, fears, and then that mole on your arm that's beginning to look like a Rorschach test. We're constantly spinning the plates of our attention. So perhaps the entire planet is not such a ridiculous metaphor after all for the scope of our lives and everything we need to pay attention to. Now I know I've painted a bleak picture here, but let's consider the flip side. Think of your personal journey of self-improvement, your efforts to cultivate new empowering habits, to live a better life, to be a better person. By the time you notice the changes, things are much further along than you think. At the beginning of any journey of self-improvement, the changes are as invisible as a speck the size of a water molecule on a pond the size of the surface area of the entire planet Earth. And at first the changes are invisible, and then they go unnoticed. And then these changes are trivial, but then they become surprising, and they become exciting, and then they're awesome, and the next thing you know, you are an overnight success. The problems in life may soon be bigger than you expected, or bigger than you could have anticipated. So start now. Whatever you're going to do it as if you're running out of time, because you might be. And the work you're doing to improve yourself, to improve your life, the work you think may be a waste of time or not giving you what you had hoped to have by now, have faith. It's taking you where you want to be. It's happening faster than you think, even if you can't see it yet. Even, especially, if you can't see it yet. So I asked AI to write it out in words so I can understand it. And seriously, I'm busy recording a video here and you're busy dreaming. Okay, I'm just going to give it a little bit of a moment while Pepper is having her moment, shall we? That's right. Keep on. Keep dreaming. We'll just wait, shall we? Are you done dreaming now? It looks like she's done dreaming, so we're going to start again.